welcome to another episode of It Would Seem As Though, the podcast where we talk about anything, everything, and nothing.
Because we can.
I'm Vesta.
I'm Annika.
And today we're not talking about nothing. We're talking about something, and there will probably be some nothing thrown in there.
Sure.
Because, we do always get off topic and talk about the most random and bizarre things, but that's who we are, so get used to that. But today we decided that this whole month we were going to talk about different things regarding Black History, as it is Black History Month. And last week we talked about that a little bit and talked kind of about who the most common folks talked about or taught in schools are. And we were thinking we wanted to bring up a couple more folks that we find interesting that, of course, will never be taught in schools, but they're important people to know. Now, I have chosen some people from Black queer history because also important. Mm-hmm. And these are people who made a difference in their time, and one of them is still alive and still making a difference and still working, but the other two are not. But that's what I'm going to be kind of talking about. What are you talking about?
I'm going to focus more on Black academics. So focusing on critical race theory and Black feminists who help shape feminism for women of color. And there's an exhaustive list of it, but I'm not going to talk about all of them. But I'm going to hit
we only have an hour.
Some that some people should know regularly. Okay.
I'm going to tell you honestly, I don't really know a ton. I know, again, kind of probably the most the ones that are talked about the most. Mm-hmm. Like Angela Davis and. Yep. Of course, I know Maya Angelou and different people like that. Mm-hmm. And if you've read Maya's books, first of all, what I knew about her before I read her books was just that she was a poet. Mm-hmm. That was kind of it.
Yeah.
I knew she was an author. I knew she'd written many books. I had no idea the life that she had lived, which included so much part of the civil rights movements and just kind of her journey, which was amazing. So, go buy a book. She's amazing. All right. Well, so one of the people I wanted to talk about she is a model, and her name, when she first started modeling, her name was Tracy Norman. Google her. She's amazing. But she changed her name to Tracy Africa later. So, Black trans model who, in 1975, was the face of Clairol's Born Beautiful campaign, and she had her face on the color box. Now, I'm not sure, do they even still do color boxes with faces? I don't even know. I don't know. But hers was an auburn shade, and she was beautiful. And she then kind of was working with a lot of different places, people, and got an exclusive contract with Avon. So, super cool. She was the face of their skincare line. And I assume since it's Avon and it was in the 70s, it would have been their black skincare line specifically. Mm-hmm. But in 1980, she was doing a photo shoot for Essence magazine. And the assistant to the hairdresser either knew her tea, figured out her tea, or something, and decided, of course, that he needed to what? Share her tea. So he went to the editor of that photo shoot and spilled her tea. Yeah. And she was immediately fired.
Because that's what you do.
I mean, they literally took her off the photo shoot that day and didn't even, because nowadays I imagine it would be more like, oh, we're done with you today, and not whatever, but no. They took her out of the photo shoot, and she went to Europe, as so many people do, to make a living. Especially so many black people, so many black women go over there because, one, they're so much less uptight than Americans, and so much less racist. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of racism, so I'm sure there's tons of it. But in that business, there seems to be a lot more work to be given. And so she worked for Balenciaga, but even that, after about 6 months, and her reputation of being a trans woman kind of traveled around, and she didn't work anymore.
Of course not.
Right. And so what she did is she came back to New York and got involved in the ballroom scene.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for those of you listening who don't know what the ballroom is,
Which
you should know. Google it.
We've talked about it.
And I don't mean like
every episode.
the white folks dancing the tango and the whatever. No.
Mm-hmm. It's a bunch of white people waltzing.
A bunch of white people
That's
waltzing.
what ballroom
Yeah,
is.
she had nothing to do with that.
Mm-mm.
No. She not only became involved in the ballroom scene, which is it started in New York in the late 80s. And again, we talked about a couple weeks ago the show Pose was based on that and was all about the ballroom scene. Anyway, she actually became a legend in the ballroom scene, and that's when she changed her name to Tracy Africa. And here is the cool, amazing, awesome redemption for her career. In 2016, somebody with my goodness, I just lost my train of thought there. Somebody read an article about her and decided that she should have her day in the sun, and signed her up with a modeling agency, got her back into the magazines and whatever. Well, she went back to work for Clairol, which I thought was super cool. I went back to kind of where she'd started, and she is the face of the Nice and Easy Color as Real as You Are campaign. Love that. Mm-hmm. So Clairol not only knows she's a trans woman, they're celebrating that, which amazing.
I love it.
So she is now on runways, photo shoots, and she's not a young woman. Obviously, she started modeling in the 70s. So she's older than me, and I'm old.
Imagine how much more successful she would have been had she been able to continue working. You know what I mean?
I can only imagine. Mm-hmm. You know, in reading her story, it made me think of Isis King, who, successful model, successful trans model, who kind of got her start going on America's Next Top Model. Right. And I think the problem was they just really didn't kind of know what to do with her. Now,
no, they focus on the fact that she was trans like constantly.
Right,
it's a modeling show.
Every photo shoot, every conversation was about her transness. Not, hey, you kind of sucked at this photo shoot today, or you did really great at this photo. It's like,
how did you do as a trans woman?
Right. As a trans woman, can you relate to? It's like, oh my god, which I thought just added so much to the making sure that she felt separate from the other girls.
It totally
othered her the whole time. And a couple of the girls were like, I'm not comfortable sharing a house with her. Well, except they wouldn't call her her.
These wrong pronouns. Yeah.
You know, whatever.
How cringy. Ugh.
Right. So, and Tyra, you know Tyra crazy.
Speaking of cringy.
Tyra crazy. She is so crazy. However, I am going to give her one little prop. One that she cast her, which I'm sure she did for ratings.
Sure.
But Tyra then paid for her surgeries.
Yep.
Which I was like, okay.
Do your thing.
Tyra did, and then had her come back for their little all-stars, whatever. And now she's been working pretty consistently since then. So things do change.
They can.
Slowly.
Right.
Slowly. But, and if you don't know who Isis King is, again, Google.
You have a computer.
Google is your friend.
If you're listening to this, you can do it. You're capable.
That's true. Your turn.
Okay, so the first person I want to talk about is a woman who passed away this last December. She was an author, professor, feminist, a social activist. Her name was Bell Hooks, all lowercase. She intentionally, she took the name Bell Hooks after her maternal grandmother, but she kept that all lowercase, so it took emphasis off her as a person, and people then focused more on her writing.
Oh.
So she was very interesting. She's most well known for her feminist theory that recognizes social classifications, like, for example, race, gender, sexual identity, class. And she was the first person, one of the first people to identify that they're all interconnected. And we'll talk about that more later. So she also would talk about how ignoring that people's identities intersected creates more oppression towards women, and specifically more oppression towards women of color. She was really well known just for her wide-ranging writing on gender and race, which helped push feminism beyond its white middle-class worldview. Because at the same time, not long after it, there was like Betty Friedan, who was like everyone knew was the like the feminine mystique, the white feminist writer. So Bell Hooks was not like in response to that. She was just at the same time, but her viewpoint was not that women are bored at home because they're only housewives, which was very much the white point of view. Hers was that we're women and we're black. You know what I mean? And so it's much harder to do most things. You know what I mean? We don't get hired for jobs. We get turned away from a lot.
Well, and in the whole feminist movement, it really doesn't include black women.
No, it doesn't. Not until more recently.
That's kind of been the thing all along is like, well, yeah, we want, equality for all women, but we want it for us first as white women.
Well, and so it used to be just very separated. It wasn't really until civil rights that it started to change, where people started to more inclusive feminism. But it still wasn't until the 90s, early 2000s, where they started to, feminism became more inclusive and involved. It wasn't like, for example, like TERFs, people who don't, feminists who don't want trans women to be included as feminists or as women. That's like a newer thing, but feminism in general, for the most part, should be inclusive. If your feminism isn't inclusive, then it's white supremacy.
Yeah.
So anyway, Bell Hooks, you should look her up. She's just an amazing writer. She's just real good.
Okay. Well, and on that note, I think that we should take a break. And we are back.
Hi.
I was just looking at her biography and her books and stuff, and I see here that she wrote a bunch of children's books as well. So if you're looking for good books to read to your children,
look up Bell Hooks.
That are going to include not the same stories you've always read, all about white people. I love because the first one I looked at is called Happy to be Nappy.
I love it.
Love that. So, Google her, Bell Hooks. One of the other people I was reading about, and I found her just fascinating, was, and I probably will mispronounce her name, and I apologize, but I didn't find a pronunciation key. And half the time, honest to God, the pronunciation keys I find more confusing than the actual name itself.
I'm like, I don't understand what an upside down E sounds like. Can you tell me?
No. And what is that little squiggle above this?
Yeah.
What does that mean? I don't know.
Help me.
I am not an English professor.
Stupid.
I went to school. But I went to school in Yamhill, Carlton.
Again, girl.
So, you know what I know.
In a barn with the other farm animals.
Right?
Not trying to tell you you're a farm animal, but...
But
really... Yes, exactly.
You know, honestly, I have had such a hard time shaking that whole image since, taking my husband to a graduation out there when he heard the principal giving his commencement speech and trying to be funny and trying to be like Jeff Foxworthy would think, well, you're a redneck, but he was like, you're from the country if. And one of the things was like, on the days when you get to ride your tractor to school.
You get to.
And he looks at me and he goes, what do you mean you get to ride your... And I was like, well, like once a year,
like
so, I don't know. And he's like, wait, but you get to ride your tractor to school? And I was like, I don't know. I grew up in Hicksville, okay?
Also, we're poor. We didn't have a tractor. If we had a tractor, girl, I'd be driving to school. Listen.
Yeah, no, we were poor. No tractor, no horse. No. And then I foolishly told him the story about the girl who rode her horse to school a couple of times. And never have I ever heard the end of that.
I can't.
And I'm pretty sure he pictures it like, the Beverly Hillbillies or something. I'm
sorry, is it not the Beverly Hillbillies?
No,
was that
nobody was rich like that. I mean, had they gotten money, then it probably would have been down the cement pond with the critters, but...
Right. Girl, the same town is the town where a man, I'm not going to say names, but got a DUI and couldn't drive, so he drove his riding lawnmower to the store. Like, girl, this is small town life.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's not talk about them. Let's talk about
right.
other
All right.
inspirational people.
Back to the topic at hand.
Exactly.
Storm, and again, going to mispronounce her name probably.
But we'll spell it.
And if she comes back from the grave and to tell me, then all right, it's De Laverie is DE and then LAVERIE. De Laverie. I'm going to say